Dracula, The Avenger's Wrath, Episode 1.
History remembers Dracula as a monster. I remember the man the world murdered to create him, Katherina Ivanova.
The first sign was not the smoke, it was the silence. General Vladimir reined his black stallion to a halt atop the western ridge, overlooking the Ivanova Valley. Beside him, Sir Roland narrowed his weathered eyes toward the horizon, where the small farming village lay hidden among rolling fields and ancient oak trees. No laughter, no church bells, no barking dogs, nothing, only silence. Then the wind shifted. It carried the smell of burning timber. Vladimir's heartbeat quickened. A second later he saw it, a thick column of black smoke rising into the afternoon sky. His face drained of color. "No! No!" he bellowed. Without waiting for Roland, he drove his spurs into his horse. The stallion exploded down the hillside. Roland followed close behind, shouting desperately, "Vladimir!" The general heard nothing. Every thunder of hooves echoed the same terrifying thought. Christina. Milania. Please. Not them. Not them. As they descended into the valley, more smoke appeared. Then flames. Then screams. The village was burning. Homes collapsed beneath roaring fires, while terrified villagers fled through streets littered with bodies. Soldiers wearing the colors of the kingdom rode through the chaos, cutting down anyone who stood before them. Old men, women, children. There was no battle, only slaughter. Vladimir drew his sword before his horse had fully stopped. For the innocent, he crashed into the first line of cavalry like a falling mountain. The lead rider barely had time to lift his shield before Vladimir's blade split both wood and steel, throwing the man lifeless from his saddle. A second soldier lunged with a spear. Vladimir seized the shaft beneath the blade, ripped it free, and drove it back through its owner's throat. The man tried to scream, but only a gargling sound came from him as blood filled up his throat. He stared in terror at his attacker as blood sprayed from his throat onto the lifeless bodies of his victims on the ground. "I will end you all," shouted Vladimir as he struck down another soldier. Roland arrived an instant later. "Protect the villagers." The old knight charged into the mob, his greatsword sweeping in deadly arcs as civilians scrambled behind him. Every second mattered. Every heartbeat brought Vladimir closer to his home. More soldiers surged toward him. He cut one from shoulder to waist. "None of you will leave this valley alive," shouted Vladimir, his sword now crimson from the blood of his enemies. Another lost his arm before he realized the general had moved. A third swung wildly. Vladimir caught the strike on his forearm guard, smashed the man's face with the pommel of his sword, then drove his blade through two enemies standing side by side. The streets became rivers of blood. Still, they came. Too many. Far too many. Roland fought like a man half his age, placing himself between fleeing families and advancing horsemen. Though gray-haired and scarred by decades of war, his sword never slowed. "Run!" He shoved a frightened little girl toward safety before turning to meet another charge. Vladimir finally reached the small stone cottage standing beneath the great apple tree, or what remained of it. The roof had collapsed. Fire consumed the walls. The front door hung from one hinge. His legs suddenly felt heavy. No, no, no. He stumbled through the smoke. Chris, no answer. Christina, only crackling flames. His eyes searched the broken room until they found them. Christina Ivanova lay upon the floor, one arm still wrapped around little Milania, as though even in death, she had tried to protect her daughter. Milania's tiny wooden sword rested beside her small hand, blackened by fire. Vladimir dropped to his knees. He reached toward them. His trembling fingers brushed Christina's cold face. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. The world simply stopped. Behind him, Roland appeared in the doorway. His sword slowly lowered. He said nothing. There were no words worthy of such grief. For several endless moments, silence ruled. Then, Vladimir screamed, not with the voice of a man, not with the cry of a grieving husband. It was something deeper, older, a sound so filled with unbearable anguish that it seemed to shake the valley itself. Later, survivors would swear they heard that scream from villages more than 100 miles away. Some said wolves answered it. Others claimed the birds abandoned the forest. Every witness agreed on only one thing. No human being had ever made such a sound. When Vladimir finally rose, the general was gone. Only wrath remained. He walked back into the burning street. A captain pointed toward him. There, kill him. The first soldier reached him. Vladimir tore the man's sword from his hand and buried it through another before either realized what had happened. Steel flashed, blood sprayed, bodies fell. He did not fight with discipline. He fought with despair. He had entered a bloodlust, hatred, anger, and a supernatural rage. "Kill them! Kill them all!" he shouted. Every swing carried the weight of a broken promise. Every strike answered a question heaven had failed to. The king's soldiers began retreating, not because they had been ordered, because they were afraid. "He isn't human." One threw down his weapon and ran. Another tried to mount his horse. Vladimir caught him before he reached the saddle. By sunset, the village square had become a graveyard. Dozens of soldiers surrounded him. None dared advance. Roland staggered to Vladimir's side, blood pouring from wounds across his body. "They've surrounded us." Vladimir looked around. Hundreds, archers, spearmen, horsemen, an entire battalion. Roland laughed weakly. "We always did prefer impossible odds." Vladimir managed the faintest smile. "My brother, my friend." They stood back to back. The final battle began. Arrows darkened the sky. Roland raised his shield. The first volley struck like a storm. Spears followed, then cavalry. The two warriors fought as though the world itself depended upon them. One after another, the attackers fell. The dead formed a wall around them. Still, the enemy came. The commander finally lost patience. "Archers!" 300 bows rose together. "Loose!" The air screamed. Roland shoved Vladimir aside just as the first arrows struck. 3 buried themselves in the old knight's chest. He remained standing. Another pierced his shoulder, then his leg. He smiled at Vladimir. "It has been an honor." Roland collapsed. Vladimir roared. He charged alone. The second volley met him in full stride. Arrows pierced his arms, his shoulders, his chest. Still he kept moving. The third volley struck, then the fourth, until his armor could no longer be seen beneath the forest of arrows embedded in his flesh. At last, he fell to one knee. The battlefield became silent. No one approached. Even now, they feared him. Finally, a lone mercenary stepped forward. Unlike the others, he wore no royal colors, only worn leather armor and the expression of a man long accustomed to death. He stopped before Vladimir. "You fought bravely." Blood spilled from Vladimir's lips. The mercenary sighed. But it was all for nothing. Vladimir slowly lifted his head. "What do you mean?" The mercenary knelt so only Vladimir could hear. "You still don't know." A faint smile crossed his scarred face. "The raid, the murder of your wife, your daughter. They were never the enemy's doing." Vladimir's eyes widened. "No, the order came from your own king. The words struck harder than every arrow. You became larger than the crown. The people loved you more than him. The mercenary drew a narrow dagger. For what it's worth, I almost pity you. The blade slid into Vladimir's heart. The general's eyes never left the burning ruins of his home. His final thought was not of revenge. It was of Christina's smile and Milania's laughter. Then General Vladimir died.